Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Allie and this is Allie G Reads, and I'm doing something a little different today. I'm going to do a where to start with Stephen King video. Basically, I remember working at the bookstore and everybody, wants to get into Stephen King, but they get really disappointed really fast if you don't approach it the right way, I think, because he's a genius, but his writing is very interesting. Sometimes his books are very long and very wordy and very descriptive. And I think if, you're not really a seasoned reader, or you don't like that and you are a seasoned reader, you will not be able to find a King you like if you approach it the wrong way. So I kind of just want to kind of do an introduction, because with King, the great thing about him is it's not just horror. There really is something for everybody. So I'm going to do a couple different things, and I really hope that someone will find something that they like. I haven't read all of King's books, mind you. I'm working on it. But I will say there are some that even me, as a huge fan, just don't like as much, and it is because of the writing. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to do a little bit of a story time before I actually start. So I never read teen books. I went from toddler books when I was learning to read to I think what you would classify as middle grade now, right into adult books. And the first was Stephen King, actually. Basically, when I was a kid, I think from the age of 6 to about 10, my dad once a month would take me out to the bookstore. And my dad's not a big reader and he's not a huge fan of it, but he knew I was. So it was something that he just did for me. And basically he would just go to the magazine section and find his guitar magazine, and I would just roll off into the store and find something. So, and he bought me literally anything I picked up. And I hugely appreciate that still to this day. My parents never really censored what I read, and I appreciate that, because I learned a lot about reading, and I learned a lot about myself, and I appreciate that so much. And now as an adult reading teen books for the first time, I'm thinking some of them you almost should just go into adult and bypass that YA completely, but that's just me. But yeah, so my actual first adult book I ever read and owned was a Stephen King. My introduction into Stephen King. So I'm going to kind of do it as my introduction, and then how I think other stories that people might want to start with. So my introduction into King was actually different seasons. My dad bought this for me when I was, well, not this exact edition. I don't know what happened to my other edition, sadly. Probably got donated accidentally or something, but I definitely didn't get rid of it. So I replaced it. Different Seasons is 4 novellas, and I picked it up because my favorite movie ever of life is Stand By Me, which is based on The Body, which is in this collection. This collection I think is relatively good to start with. It was good for me because 3 of the 4 have been adapted into movies. So they're short enough that you can get the idea of King as a storyteller, because he's a master of stories. But these actually aren't horror, which is also kind of refreshing. So you don't have to like horror to start with Stephen King. This collection contains The Body, Shawshank Redemption, Apt Pupil. Apt Pupil is, I think, my favorite in this collection, actually. And then Gray Matter? The Breathing Method, sorry. Breathing Method's pretty weird too. But So I think especially if like you saw the movie Shawshank and you loved it, you could arguably start there as well. Apt Pupil, I think no one has seen that movie. Ian McKellen was in it years ago. And basically it's a boy that believes that his older neighbor is a Nazi and was actually like a guard. So he starts trying to blackmail this man. And it's like this kind of like cat and mouse game. It's really good. So again, like you're getting more dramas with this collection, and of course Stand By Me. You're getting more like dramas with this collection versus horror. So I think someone maybe doesn't like horror could definitely pick this up and start as I started here. Basically this whole video, I'm pretty much going to recommend short story collections because I think that they are the best to get into King. I actually prefer his short stories to his novels for the most part. Controversial opinion again. But because I'm not huge on like the rambling, I just find them easier to get in and out. And because they're like collections, he is able to write a bunch of genres, which is also really good. I think my favorite goes between two, but I think Night Shift is probably my favorite of the collections. This is actually his first collection. Again, you have different types of stories, a good introduction to horror. There's some sci-fi stories in here, as well as just like macabre stories. So for example, I Am the Doorway is one of my favorites. I've marked it off. It's quite short, like it's not long at all, and it's sci-fi basically. So if you're a fan of sci-fi, you can get a little bit of that. My favorite in this story is The Boogeyman. It's so good. Very eerie, and very short, and the ending just packs a punch, and you're like, oh my God. It's so good. Another story in here is Strawberry Spring, which was really interesting. The Ledge is really, really interesting. There's a prequel to one of his novels, Salem's Lot, but it's Jerusalem's Lot, and it was kind of the story that started him to writing that novel. There's a prequel to The Stand in here, which is really good. And then there's this really odd, The Lawnmower Man is super friggin' weird. Like if you just want like a weird story. Quitters Inc. is a really crazy story about someone trying to quit smoking, and it goes so far down. It's really, really, really interesting. And then there's one last one I marked here. I just want to see. Children of the Fucking Corn. I forgot it was in this story. Creepy kids. You can't. So yeah, there's a few kind of things. This is his first collection. There's 20 in here. A guy quitting drinking. That goes. Whew. When did he publish this? It was originally published in 76. So I like this collection a lot. I think there's a lot in here. And again, there's like kind of the movie adaptations. So I think that this is also a good place to start. And this is probably my favorite of the collection. But right up there is Everything's Eventual. I really like this. Again, like you have ones in here that aren't all horror, which is great. And they're not that long. There's a really great creepy one. And King does, he always writes introductions, but he does a thing where he actually writes like something about every story in here. Like there's actually like at the end of this one, for example, he writes like a little paragraph about the story and how it was inspired, which is really good. I love that about this collection. So I marked 3 in here that are my personal favorites, and I think that they're amazing. Autopsy Room 4 would be the first one. And it's told from the perspective of the cadaver on the table, and it's eerie. The man in the black suit is highly underrated of his stories, but it's one of the best, and it's about a boy in the woods who meets the devil. It's so fucking good. But my favorite in here is 1408, and the movie is just as amazing, but it is different from the movie. But it's really good. So I do like this one a lot too. Again, you have kind of dramas, and even the horror isn't like necessarily like what you think would be horror, but it's like a creepy elements to it. So I really like this collection as well. I have a hard time between that and Night Shift. If I had to pick, like, again, I marked off more favorites in Night Shift, so I guess Night Shift would be my favorite. But 1408 is one of my favorite short stories ever. So, yeah, I don't know, it's hard. But I do like this one. I'll have to think about that more. If someone insists on starting with a King novel, I don't always recommend starting with a King novel, but obviously you can. You can do whatever you want. But I have a couple of suggestions that can kind of like, that are, I think, the easiest to get into and some of the best. Oddly, I went on like a break from King for a while, and then I jumped back into it, and I jumped back into a Gwendy's Button Box. So this book is actually, it's about a girl, Gwendy. We meet her when she's 12, and she meets this guy on a park bench dressed in all black and like a suit and a bowler hat, and it's the summer. And he gives her this box, this button box, and basically she has to hide it from the world, and she can't tell anybody she has it, but she's allowed to use it, but it comes at a cost. And you don't quite know what the costs are at first. This is King, like this one is not rated very well, and I'm surprised, but I like the deeper thoughts about it. I love morality tales. This is also kind of a coming of age story, which King does exquisitely. Something that's really interesting, and I think another reason to get into King, is all of his stories actually connect to others in some way. Like, all are taking place in the same universe, in the same kind of towns, and they often make references in the books to other ones. And then there's like a timeline that these all kind of fall on, which is genius. And I personally don't know of another author that does that. If someone else knows, please tell me, because I'd love to start investing in that. It's not as though it's like a fantasy where you have to get into like a world building. It's just that he just has these little like nuggets of information where you're like, oh, I remember that from another book. And that is genius to me. So, of course, Gwendy's Button Box takes place in Castle Rock, which is where Stand By Me takes place, and various others, of course. And there's a character in here that's actually in a bunch of others. So that's what's really, really amazing about this. I really love Gwendy's Button Box. And I think it definitely got me back into King after my slump. So I do recommend someone start here, because again, it's not really horror per se, but it's kind of like would you or would you tale. So this is a good one too. Also, King was writing under a pen name for a while, Richard Bachman. The Long Walk is a really good place to start as well. This is dystopian. Again, King can do anything. So even if you don't like horror, you can find something in King that you will like. This is dystopian. I think this is actually going to be adapted shortly. I know, like, I have a friend and he also loves King, and I believe this is his favorite King book as well. Richard Bachman, but King. Basically, it's set in the future, and it's about this race, and all these teenage boys do it, and you basically just walk and walk and walk and walk and walk, and you're not allowed to stop. And whoever is standing last wins. It's dark, it's disturbing, it's crazy. Also coming of age in a way, and King does coming of age so well. So it's short enough, there's not a lot of detail in it, and it's really great pacing. So this, if you are going to pick a novel to start with, this is a good one. And finally, my favorite king of all time and one of my favorite books of all time. Every time someone asks me, I always have two books, and this is one of them, Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary is unreal. This is horror, and actually King says this is his most terrifying book he's ever wrote. And he did not want this published at first because he thought the content would be too bad. Do not watch the movies. They're terrible. Both. This book is one of those books, I was reading it and actually getting creeped out by my surroundings. Like, my cat jumped on my bed when I was reading this for the first time, and I almost flew off the fucking bed a couple years ago. It was that feeling, like I almost dove out of the bed. I was so like just startled. This book is amazing, and it like invokes these creepy kind of feelings, and it's a story about grief and loss, actually, and contemplating death, and it's just so good. So I'm going to do a video on this book by itself, so I'm not going to say too much more. But again, it doesn't have a lot of the ramblings, so you could easily kind of read this as well and just get a taste for like his classic horror. I think this is one of the first couple he's wrote. It came out in the 80s. Unbelievable. It's so incredible. It's just amazing. So I do think either one of those three novels or one of the 4 short story collections would be the best to get into it. And again, you don't have to like horror to pick up a King, because that's the best part, and I think that's one of the reasons why his stories endure this long and why he is still writing, because he's not just in one genre. He can jump genres and still make amazing stories. So yes, you don't have to be a horror fanatic. I'm not recommending you horror stories per se. I am recommending some entryways to get invested in, I think, one of the greatest storytellers of all time. And that's what it comes down to. He is a damn good storyteller. So jump on the King train. It's not like he's not overrated at all. So definitely worth it to get started. And that's it. So yeah, I'd love to hear if anyone else has one of your short stories. I haven't read all of the short story collections, so I want to know what your favorite short story is, in which collection, and I want to know if you liked any of these books. I want to know if you have another suggestion of a way someone can get started, or if you just want to read one and I recommend it. I want to know what you thought. So please like, comment, and subscribe if you would like to see more. And I don't have an exit, so bye.